say if you win the rat race, you're still a rat. When you adopt Bitcoin, you stop running the rat race and start walking your own path. Bitcoin for me is the ultimate savings technology and helps me to reduce the uncertainty that everyone has towards their future. Okay, we are all corrupt when it comes to money. So we need a money that is incorruptible. We need a money that you don't have to trust anyone. Once you realize that all those things are broken because the money is broken, there's like only one option, and the option is move to another money. That's also how I view Bitcoin. You know, I just said savings technology. It's not an investment.
You want to make a difference in the world, stack sats. You're going to have enough wealth that you'll be able to very much change the community around you. All right, guys, my guest today is Bram Kanstein from Bitcoin for Millennials. One of the first shows I was ever on was with Bram. He's awesome. I love this guy, and I'm so psyched that he's come back to be on my channel and to talk to us at Byte Federal today. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm happy that you came on my podcast. I love that conversation, so I can't wait to jam today.
Cool, man. So you know what? I'm just going to start with the fact that I had no idea you were so damn tall. I saw a picture of you standing next to Robert Breedlove. And yeah, you're a giant, dude. You are a giant.
I'm taller than Breedlove, but Breedlove is probably like 3 times as wide. I think. He's huge.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So when I see you and we take a picture together, I'll just put my arm around your waist.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's always funny. I mean, well, now I'm sitting straight, but usually I'm a bit slouched, you know, like under the camera. So I don't look as tall, but yeah.
Awesome. So how's Europe doing today? I guess the German finance minister was scolding the chancellor. And
former finance minister
scolding the chancellor about his lack of having a Bitcoin strategy. What is going on? That was all over X today.
Yeah. He actually, well, the whole German government fell today, but that was kind of like as expected. But this former finance minister actually got fired some time back because he didn't want to agree with the deficit proposal. And now, I mean, there's going to be snap elections in Germany. And today he mentioned something like I listened to it. He's just like, why aren't we paying attention to Bitcoin? In America, they're paying attention to Bitcoin. And I talked about it with someone, and we kind of realized that, maybe this is going to be like a big talking point, you know. So the snap elections, I can Google when they are, but I think it's going to be pretty quick, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, like if you don't have the crypto Bitcoin internet crowd, then who are you actually focusing on? I think it's interesting to see this shift. Even just now, I read about Trudeau in Canada that might resign. So, and I mean, his biggest competitor, or like, is a Bitcoin guy. So fascinating to see.
Does like Bitcoin become the key that unseats the old administrations? Because if you've been anti-Bitcoin and now you got to get on the pro-Bitcoin bandwagon in order to keep up with this hash war that seems to be spreading from country to country to country now, that's going to be pretty interesting, because like there's a lot of countries in Europe where you can have elections on demand, right?
You mean on demand? Well, most countries have a system where there's like a coalition between parties. So they make a coalition to form a government. And it's possible that if they have some issues together that they can't resolve in between, then they call that like a cabinet can fall. So they dissemble, basically they fall apart. And usually the person who leads the country then calls for new elections. But it's interesting to see that this Bitcoin is becoming some sort of topic. I think it's a big Overton window shift. If someone in the German parliament, especially the former finance minister, now is calling to pay attention, basically. But in general, that same conversation that I just mentioned, we basically talked about, like what's the core of this, right? Is that Bitcoin and fiat or whatever? But I think it's more about centralization versus decentralization, where you see that especially in Europe, and I think last few months there have been some brutal stats and like memes shared about Europe, like how Europe is just behind in everything except regulations, you know. So they overregulate everything, and yeah, it's just I don't really know how to describe it, but I think it has to do with you know, me, for example. I reply to like almost every single Christine Lagarde tweet. She's the president of the European Central Bank, with like a picture of like in 2000 €1 was €1, and in 2020 €1 was 30 cents. You know, like you're doing great. But
Mm-hmm.
for the past 4 years, I cannot even find a reliable chart to show how worse it's gotten after that, and it's way worse. And I think Europe has a big problem with this monetary union. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
it's just not. It just doesn't work. I would say it has failed, but yeah, there's no one really acknowledging that. So they're really forcing also like a political union. So way more
Right.
centralized power to Brussels, which is where that's where the seat of the EU Parliament is. Whereas, you know, in other places in the world, you see, yeah, kind of resistance against that. I think, you know, Trump winning in the US is an example of that, where, you know, a lot of Democratic party members had a lot of restrictive policies or proposals for that. And yeah, I think, yeah, the pendulum can only swing that far with regards to all this regulation, etc. And so apparently the people are fed up. And I think in a lot of countries where there's elections coming up, it's kind of this battle between, do you want more or less regulation? And for example, in Argentina, Milei is setting an interesting example. You know, if you read about Milei in my country, he's a far right libertarian, which is a fascinating term. Yeah, I don't know. Extreme right, something, something. I don't know. I don't even know. But, you know, the stats speak for themselves. And I think, yeah, of course, every ideology, I mean, even with Bitcoin, everything is sort of an experiment, you know, and I think people are quick to judge. But I find it interesting that someone like Millet can actually try out his ideology, and which conceptually makes a lot of sense. But now you see the stats back it up. So I mean, yeah, it's just a really interesting time that we live in general, I think.
It is. We have a sense here, at least, you know, amongst the people that I've been chatting with, that the next 6 months, well, let's just say the first 6 months of 2025 in the United States are going to be highly disruptive. Yes. Right? I mean, we're hearing the transition team talk about the plans and what they plan to do. They're the kind of like the light that they're going to shine on corruption, inefficiencies in government, crime, the just the amount of change that's going to come so rapidly. And I hear a lot of people talking about that change coming rapidly because that is going to probably break a lot of things that then will need to get fixed and get back on track before the midterms. So do you have the same sense in Europe that the first half of 2025 are going to be very chaotic, or do you not feel the same way?
Well, I don't really have an eye on like all the elections and stuff, but I think, well, definitely something is happening with regards to Ukraine. I think Trump is pretty clear on the direction that they want to go. I don't know what the effect of that will be. To be honest, I feel that in Europe in general, there's kind of like this war drumbeat, which is interesting.
Very pro war still.
Pro defending Ukraine, and they need to be in the EU, and Putin is a bad guy, etc. You know, that's oversimplifying it, but you know, we need more defense industry in this country. We need to make our own drones and blah blah blah. Blah. Like it's kind of scary on one side. On the other side, I actually look more to America than the US. I think it's mainly just also due to my own interests, you know, with regards to the money, the fiscal situation, and etc. Like I feel that, you know, if America would actually default on the debt, you know, and nothing would really happen, then of course that spills over in Europe, and you see that Europe has not been strong um, in any regards. We are kind of like in the middle between, America and China in that sense, and we haven't really played any role in being a facilitator, for example, there.
Mm-hmm.
um, so I feel that we are not really prepared for a new, kind of like shift in the geopolitical situations in the world. Like if America is going to focus more on themselves, I mean, when you hear RFK talk about, why do we have war? We should look at ourselves first. And when you realize that, America can isolate themselves also with all
Mm-hmm.
the energy and the resources
Right.
and all these things. And on the eastern side, there's the BRICS initiative that of course have their own problems, especially when they have to figure out like what is the currency that we're going to trade in.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw China issued US dollar treasuries in Saudi Arabia, like 2 billion, like of the
Really?
US dollars that they have. And they,
I hadn't heard about this.
yeah, it's really wild. And that was, bought up super quick. So that's, I think, a big threat if China can issue US dollar bonds in essence. So like a lot of stuff is happening, and my general feeling about Europe is just really like asleep at the wheel. Is
Mm.
really focused on staying together, which obviously is very important. I'm not saying it's not that, but it feels like that, and maybe it is like that, and I don't have enough information, but it feels like we have to stay together at all costs, which might be some sort of further escalation. So I'm not really sure
Mm.
about that, but that's kind of maybe a quick overview from a European perspective.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Sure. Oh, that's all right. Um, Gosh, I don't know the whole like I'm very much kind of just an outside observer of all this stuff, but watching how rapidly uh, the war spread into Syria, watching what's happening in Georgia, um, hearing the drumbeat of war in Europe. It's like it's almost like there's a section of the government, a part of the government that is like, this is it. We have to push to move this war to the next level before Trump is inaugurated, or else we've lost our shot. It's like I feel like they want the fight so bad, as opposed to trying to find peace, trying to find resolution that would benefit everybody. So it's almost like sometimes I feel like we're like ants sitting in the anthill watching these giants battle, and there's not much we can do except like try not to get stepped on.
Well, I think that's very true. I mean, I'm definitely I'm not a geopolitical expert or whatever, but what I just find interesting, and I mean, well, of course, we'll talk about Bitcoin, but like once you understand a certain subject very deeply, like how I understand Bitcoin, you realize that things that are written or communicated about Bitcoin in this example, in more like mainstream media and like government communication, etc. It's just like these people have no fucking clue what they're talking about, right? So
Mm-mm.
you become really, I want to say, not only skeptical, but just more rational, right? Like just give me the information and let me decide what I want to do with it, or like how to discern that, right? And I feel
Mm-hmm.
that, for example, in Europe, it's just like, I call this like Disney communications. Like we are good and Putin is bad, whereas, like, the whole world is gray. There is no black and white,
Yeah.
and so I find it really difficult to have like a clear opinion based on, you know, clear and general information about what is going on there. But I do know that, again, Disney communication, like we are good, he is bad.
Right.
I don't know. It's just too simplistic,
Yep, it
but
is.
that is the general communication that is used
Mm-hmm.
here, at least in my country. And so, you know, just the reason that they communicate in that way shows me that there's more behind it that's not being told. And I think one of the things is what I just mentioned, is like, kind of this threat to the unity in Europe, mainly because um, one, the currency is failing, and two, they want more centralization towards Brussels. That, yeah, just a lot of people don't want that, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's in a good way. I mean,
Hmm.
the European Union started as a trading union, which is brilliant, I think, with open borders for trade and etc. But I mean, a Dutch person is not a French person, is not a Hungarian person, is not an Italian, in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way, exactly.
And sometimes perhaps also in a bad way, but that's fine. Like, all these individual cultures are great, but you cannot say like we are all, like, there's a difference, right? It's interesting. Like, we are all Europeans, everyone is on the European continent, right?
Hmm.
But we are not all European Unionists or something
Right,
like that, right?
right.
I mean, like, I live in one of the richest countries in Europe and in the world, and one of the founders of the EU. Yeah, of course, a country like Italy or I don't know, Moldova or something, for them it's great to be in the European Union. It's because we are paying for it, right? So
Yeah.
is it clear what we are getting from that, right? And I feel that that is maybe we do, but I think in general, just the communication is just really, really bad, and it's very presumptuous, right? Like, oh, we are all one, we are all Europeans, etc., etc. But it's kind of like it's very forced, and I think a lot of people don't like that because they don't know
Hmm.
why it would benefit them, for example.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I've often feared that Europe would lose the diversity of culture, because that was the charm of Europe for me, was so many unique cultures, languages, experiences that you could have in such a tight little part of the world. And it's an incredible experience to go between Italy and Germany and Austria and France and
super
Sweden
cool.
and Denmark. It's
Yeah,
really cool, and to turn that into a strip mall like like America would be a shame, right? So like this whole idea of a European Union and one currency, and it just was kind of like, man, I
yeah.
hope they're not heading down that path, because that's what makes Europe so special. And so to see that maybe a division isn't such a bad thing. It's just, let's appreciate each other's differences, and not, we don't need to fight over it.
Yeah, well, I think, for example, a currency could work. But I heard this in a podcast when people talked about this. Like, the U.S. started as a political union, right? When the states, certain states were formed, etc. Like, okay, we are going to do this together. This is the idea of America, etc. And after that became the monetary union. Like, okay, there should be like a currency that can be used in the entirety of this federation, basically. And in Europe, it's the other way around, right? So they forced a monetary union. Some countries, including my country, actually did not want to have the euro. There's a pretty well viewed interview with the former Dutch central bank director, president, I think last year or something, where he said, "Yeah, I was at the table, and we actually didn't want it because Italy would always be in debt or have a deficit. Like, that just doesn't work. That's the sickest child in Europe, basically. But we were forced to do it. Literally, his words. And so he said, yeah, I think it was kind of like, failed from the start, doomed from the start. And since we are seeing that, they are forcing a political union. They're trying to force together this political union, right, to create this more decentralization, just to save this monetary union, basically. But yeah, that doesn't really work. Like, your connection and shared ideology in the creation of a political union. Like in America, then like the monetary union is more like a practical thing. Whereas the monetary union in the EU was really politically driven. And once it got clear that that's fundamentally flawed, then they're trying to force this political union, which isn't really about ideology anymore. It's more like a lost aversion type of situation. And yeah,
and then enters the voluntary monetary union of Bitcoin. And
yeah,
that could be something that any European, any diverse background, any culture, any part of the world can opt in voluntarily. And it's a practical, like you said, that was a great word, a practical application, a practical choice of saving your value, saving your energy into a system, but outside of you, so that you could live in the culture and the community and build the life that you want, that's right for Germany or right for Italy or right for Greece, while at the same time having a monetary system that sits outside and that is not based on the debts of all these different countries,
yeah.
completely debt free. So do you think that we're just seeing the very first wave lap ashore here with Poland and Slovenia,
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
having an interest in building a Bitcoin reserve? What happened today in Germany? These could be the very first little waves that where we start to separate money from state, and we're across the whole European Union over the course of the next who knows how many decades.
Well, yeah. What I find interesting is that you saw the countries you mentioned. I have a draft. It's almost finished for an open letter to my central bank, my finance Secretary of Finance, and my government, an open letter to adopt Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, because we are like the number 10 gold holder in the world, with a lot of gold also in America, by the way. And I feel that even if as is stated in the proposal by Senator Lames, even if America sells a bit of their gold, a small percentage to buy Bitcoin, that would hurt the credibility of gold, because it shows it has an equal competitor. It will hurt the price. It will hurt the gold reserves. And I feel like in my country, nobody is paying attention to that. So I want to try to create some media attention and at least get the conversation going, because, as you said, in these other countries, this is being mentioned. It's being mentioned by people with a certain stature, and it's part of a conversation, and that shows you that despite all the efforts to keep this monetary union afloat, there's still game theory between countries. It's also fascinating that I learned that the gold reserves, for example, in Europe, of each country are proportionate to their contribution to like the whole European GDP. So it has to be a fair game. So if I'm Poland, I cannot have more gold than the Netherlands or than Germany,
Really?
for example. Yeah, so that's like that's probably a written agreement. That's not a gentleman's agreement, but that shows you. I mean, like, it's what Bitcoin taught me. Like, if you need these rules, then there's no real free market. There's no competition, right? Like, what is the benefit for Poland, as a younger entry into the EU, to just totally outwork everyone?
Right.
It's capped.
Well, that's
eventually, right? So then
is
that's
that
what
an
I feel like.
incentive then? Is that an incentive then for a lot of these
No, but
countries
I mean, like, if you
to adopt Bitcoin quicker, because
that's what I think. Yeah, of
if they've
course,
got
but
they're
that
limited
will.
on their gold reserves.
Yeah, but that will be an interesting challenge, right? Because, okay, if I adopt Bitcoin, and Bitcoin can be a competitor to the gold reserves, so they will add to the reserves of a country, which would go over to whatever the agreed distribution is between these gold reserves. If Bitcoin is on par with gold, it doesn't even have to be with the price. But if the US says, this is as good of a treasury asset as gold, then I think that's the narrative. And I think the narrative is really important, especially if you think about all the flaws that gold has compared to Bitcoin in that sense. Like, that's a very easy dissemination, I think, if you put those together. The only thing gold has is the narrative. It's been used for 5,000 years. I don't subscribe to all the, it's used in a computer and a blah blah, like that's nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the only narrative for gold, it's been used for 5,000 years. Yeah, okay, that's fine. But if I'm Poland and I want to trade with a country outside the EU, but that country doesn't want euros, then how do I do that? Do I want to use the dollar? So I feel that that is a big use case for Bitcoin, in essence, this apolitical and trustless characteristic. Two of the many characteristics of Bitcoin, but I think apolitical and trustless and instant or like final settlement. It's the perfect asset to trade big amounts of value between countries. And
Yeah.
you see the fact that they are talking about it means in within these countries, or that it might become a topic in the German election. It shows you that there's no alignment in the EU, at least not with regards to the monetary union. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. For example, Poland has a big battle with regards to immigration with the rest of the EU, and yeah, it's just interesting to see. Like again, I'm not a geopolitical expert, but it's more like, okay, you have this union, but you also have rebels within this union, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what? And again, I think a union is not a bad thing, but if it's not clear who benefits from it, and who doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, what then it's just fundamentally flawed in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I feel in general the whole EU union has gotten some overreach of this centralized force, whereas if you go back to the trade union and certain open borders and free travel, etc., then just like a lighter type of union than what it is now, it would probably be better. And yeah, perhaps Bitcoin is a wedge to get back to a different or a better equilibrium with regards to states' power versus the power of the
Yeah.
union.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it. The only last thing we'll talk about in Europe, and then we'll move on. But I do find it interesting that it seems like the wave is coming from the east, right? Like you see, Russia
Mm.
was pro Bitcoin, China pro Bitcoin, Russia pro Bitcoin, Poland, Slovenia, um, I know Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic, I should say, and other like it feels like it's moving east to west. Do you get a sense of that?
Not that specifically, but the fact that the West is later makes a lot of sense. I mean, I live in luxury in this country because we pillaged the entire world. I mean,
Yeah.
that I think is in general a topic that not a lot of
Yeah.
people talk about. And
Right.
and I mean, if you get to pillage the entire world and you get to live long of that and serve your citizens to let them live in what is luxury compared to 99% of other people in the world, then you probably want to do that up until you can't anymore.
Right.
And so I feel that's just a very slow change. That's also one of the reasons why I want to publish this open letter. I actually think I'm going to shelf out a few thousand euros to get like a full page ad in like a total
Wow, that'll be cool.
anti Bitcoin newspaper, just to see if they take my money.
Right.
That's the point in general. But I just want to get it out there and see what the reactions are, right? I think um, the difficulty is that it's just not talked about. Just literally what I just said. No one talks about it. Like, okay, we have lived in absolute luxury for dozens of years, which is great, but we have to be honest, how we got there,
Right.
and it feels like we are very complacent in that sense. And
It's like that blockbuster moment for an entire country.
perhaps yeah. Well, I think
Right.
we will probably be fine, but I mean, like, I had a conversation with someone who asked me like, oh, what do you think is like traditional Dutch culture or something? What are like cultural things? And then I said like, well, I don't really know, but if I see this video of like kids in China in an elementary school, like synchronized bouncing a ball, they're like cooking for each other when they're like 5, 6 years old. They're disassembling, whole motors from cars, and they're learning all this stuff. I think like, whatever you think of China, there's a lot of bad things about China, but they instill a certain level of culture in the youth, what they
Hmm.
think is important for them to know, and we have nothing of that, literally zero, right? I was in the States a few weeks ago, and although there's again many problems in the US as well,
No,
you
yeah,
feel a certain type of, yeah, there's a certain American culture, like how people are bonded together in a certain way, how they help each other. Just again, this is from a foreigner perspective,
sure.
right? But just
It's a very positive
there's an
positive look. Thank
there's
you.
an undertone. Well, there's a lot wrong, but I don't know. Like there's a certain undertone that is like American. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And or maybe you don't. I don't know.
No, I felt like it's interesting you bring that, because I mean, I literally felt that come back after the election.
Yeah,
I like
that's how what
I
it looks like from a difference as
and
well.
I
Yeah.
don't know how much of it is just my internal view of the world, or if it's really. But I mean, like a lot of us, my family and friends, were just very, very like
What's optimism?
worried and pessimistic going into this election, and coming out, it's like almost like the entire world changed for us.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Of
interesting.
well, like now we can get to work and have a positive impact on building America 2.0, because I think a lot of us felt like we were very close to losing it,
Hmm.
losing
Well,
that
yeah,
vision of America.
I don't know if it was JFK, like a video from JFK, but just the original idea of America is great.
Yeah.
Is a in my opinion, a perfect idea for a country, right? But it's really hard. But that makes it such a good idea. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like you
Yeah.
have to work for it to achieve it so that you can get like the benefits of getting there. But it's not so it's conceptually it's a really good idea, but it's really hard to get there. And I feel, yeah, I just said like it's radical optimism. Like if you just,
Hmm.
the sentence of like if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Or what is
Hmm.
the thing? Like just that is American for me.
Hmm.
If we can
Hmm.
build this thing, then we can also build that thing. And if we can
Hmm.
build that thing, we could also build that thing. Like
Yes.
it's just this perpetual radical optimism about like everything is possible. Nothing is too big
Right.
in America. Like for me, that is an American idea. But of course, like there's a again, this is my understanding. I did not have any American history or something, but to me, this idea is it's also pretty spiritual in a sense, because you have the the temptation of what you build, right? The abundance or the wealth that you build by actually putting in the work is it's tempting to abuse it, right? And I mean, like for
Hmm.
example, when I was in the States and I was like, for fun, I put on the TV and it's just like big pharma ads like all over. Like that is just
Yeah.
really fucked up. That's what I mean. Like that is like one
Right.
example
Right. Right. It goes
where
to so far.
like
Yeah.
the European mind cannot comprehend. You know what I mean? So that's like an excess, or like the I was on Ocean Drive in Miami. I tripped over a Lamborghini and a Ferrari, and then I walk across like along the beach, and there's four guys sleeping in the bushes, and then I cross the street and I
Yeah.
see a guy get like a half-filled Starbucks Frappuccino from a trash bin, and he starts sipping it. And it's also something the European mind cannot comprehend in that sense. But like that has just gone too far. Like you
Yeah.
feel that everyone has freedom, but if you have like freedom and you really know, and there's like really no one that's coming to save you, that's like a bad way of freedom in a
Yeah. I
sense, right?
think
Because I don't
the
know if that
way
makes sense,
no,
but
it
it's just
does. It totally makes sense. And we talk about this kind of stuff a lot, and it's like what trying to figure out like what broke in the American dream. And I think a lot of it goes back to money.
yeah.
Because once the money was broken, once we were off somewhat of a hard standard, right? That was the slow decay into where we are today, which is peak fiat. And that decay meant that you needed both mom and dad to go to work. It meant for some of the poorest Americans, I was financially better off if I was a single mom. It meant all these, these things that it meant go into debt to keep up with the Joneses, right? It meant all these things, that these risks that you would take, or these misaligned incentives that you would engage in order to chase that dream, that ended in failure for so many people. And so we have this massive divide now between the best of the best and the worst of the worst.
Mm.
And I'm hopeful that moving back towards a hard money system and moving away from a debt-based monetary system, whether that's gold or Bitcoin or just Bitcoin, is going to realign the incentives properly so that people can start to make long-term decisions about what's best for their family, where they don't have to be so in debt to get ahead. They don't have to be chasing false systems in order to try and like we've talked about this before. Like there's this idea of in a peak Fiat game that you literally will burn anybody or take, cheat as hard as you can to get the money.
Yeah.
Where in a hard money system like Bitcoin, your incentives are aligned to be a long-term thinker, plan, work hard, save. And that's a totally different culture that I think then starts to affect the family, and then starts to affect the kids and multiple generations. And when you build that structure around a group of people, you're going to get less people sleeping in the bushes, right? And you're going to have a middle class reemerge, and create that 1950s type America that when we were sort of peak prosperity.
Yeah, but that's also why I called it spiritual just now, right? Like we can bond over the ideology at the beginning of the USA, right? Like, let's say you were there and you were like, oh, this is so hopeful, and we're going to do this together, and we're going to build, etc. Like that is just bonding over an ideology, or like something where you would like to go to, basically. But why is it spiritual? Is because, and I only realized this through my journey into Bitcoin, and it actually, I'll take a little sidestep to explain, but I thought it was interesting. I heard Joe Rogan talk to a guest, I don't know who it was, but they looked at a clip of Madeleine Albright. I think it's about like first Gulf War, where they ask her like, was the death of like 500,000 children, was it justified? And she says, yeah, well, according to our calculations, that was justified. Like just a hard answer, right? And then the clip stops, and Rogan and the guest are like, what a fucking psychopath. Like, how can you sleep at night and this and that? And so they're saying that. And then they say like, well, but you also have to be honest, right? Like it's really easy to like from a distance step on your moral high horse or a ladder or whatever, however you want to call it, like your moral tower, and say like, well, if I would be in that position, I would never ever do that. I would never ever say that, right? And so they talked about it, and then I realized, yeah, that is very true, right? Like it's very true that we like to say like, oh, that's a bad person, or they did bad things. Like objectively, 500,000 children, that is obviously a bad thing. It's not even about that example. It's more about like the pointing to another person and saying like, okay, I would never do that, or like I could never do that. But when you think about, again, back to this idea of America, okay, we're going to build together, right? And then at one point there's so much opportunity to do good things, but there's also opportunity to do bad things, right? Like to corrupt a system that you have a certain position in, that gives you the opportunity to corrupt it or abuse it. And once I realized that we are all corruptible, right? Like you are corruptible, I am corrupt. If it's about your own survivorship, then yeah, I would want you to die instead of me, right? And I mean, you see that with children. It's like me. I want food. I need to survive, etc. So I think that's something innate that we all have. And so when you are in a position to corrupt a certain system that you are a part of, you would probably do it for your own benefit. Maybe you would even think, oh, this is not that bad. And so back to, so why I think it's spiritual is like, okay, you're building together, but at one point there's this option to corrupt the money, right? And so you go off the gold standard, you print the money to create more of the abundance, basically, right? 80s and 90s in the US were peak time for anyone to ever live, probably, right? Like sky's the limit, literally. That's the whole vibe in the 80s, 90s, 80s even more than 90s, right? But because you lose touch with this collective effort, collective in a good way, not the communist way, the collective effort to build something big, that's when you get all the division, right? And then you get the few and the many and the rich and the poor and all these things, and you basically just lose that connectedness of doing that together. And I think once you realize, or this is something I realized, like, okay, we are all corrupt when it comes to money. So we need a money that is incorruptible. We need a money that you don't have to trust anyone for, right? But that anyone can verify for themselves. That's the whole point with Bitcoin for me, is that, and also when people are listening, like you don't have to listen to me or to Paul when we say like, oh, Bitcoin is interesting. You decide it for yourself, but you can verify the whole thing for yourself. It's not that someone says like, oh yeah, we have the US dollar and that's built on trust, or we have the euro that's built on trust. Those are literally things that people in central banks say, right? Like the Christine Lagarde says that a lot, like there's trust in the currency, but based on what? Like that's the whole point. Like if you never show why it should be trusted, if you have a clear graph from 2000 to 2020 where it like loses 70+% of its value, why would you trust a thing? So you need a money that's incorruptible, because the money is an expression of value, what someone finds important, right? What someone expended their time and energy to get a reward in the form of money, and they're spending it on something that they find important. And if we get back to, or if we get to a money, or we get to adopt a money that is incorruptible, that we cannot abuse, that we can only benefit from, as you mentioned, right? Fiat money is a zero-sum game. I win, you lose. And Bitcoin is a mutually beneficial game. We can benefit from it only if we adhere to its rules. And so I know that you, as another Bitcoiner, that it does, I don't even have to trust you. That's the whole point. The whole idea of Bitcoin is that you can only benefit from its properties when you follow its rules. There's only like the door is like it's like a one-way door, basically. And if we get to a money that is incorruptible, then we just get back to human incentives. And so you can try to game it, but it's incorruptible. So you cannot game it. So your best bet, your biggest incentive is to conform to the rules of this money, which for a lot of people is going to be hard, because you're going to have to work for the money. You're going to have to deliver real value to receive the best reward, the best asset to ever exist, and that's ever existed. Okay. And if we get to that point, and everyone is, I usually say forced, but I mean it in a good way. You're incentivized in the strongest way possible to add real value, to figure out, what am I here to do? How can I serve other people? How can I help other people? How can I contribute to building this amazing country together? Then you can actually go forward again. Then you can get back to, well, you mentioned 1950s peak, but like working together to build a better future for the children. And it sounds so corny, but I mean, like, I think that's the biggest thing that we can achieve. I had a tweet today that went a little viral, but someone replied to me, or he asked me, what if everyone has Bitcoin, or what if Bitcoin is adopted? And I said, well, then everyone is working very hard to get rewarded in this best reward possible. And then he said, okay, but what will happen then? And then I said, this is what I believe, is this, then we live in abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's the highest thing that we can achieve, I think.
I think people
Right?
have a hard time grokking that, but I think you're 100% right. Like, and there's a couple times in your when you were talking there where I was thinking exactly that the guy sleeping in the bushes is because of a scarcity of resources. The inversion is that this scare when you invert it and you make the money scarce and the resources plentiful, then, as Jeff Booth says, everything goes to zero against Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, we get
And
plentiful resources because the money is hard.
yes, and people, we're living in a society now where that is inverted improperly. So if you want to have a peaceful world, if you want to have a world where everybody has a fair opportunity to build the life they want to live, you have to deliver them hard money so that they can experience prosperity from hard work.
Yes.
And that is Bitcoin's greatest gift. But it's so hard, Bram, to get people to see that.
Yes. In
They
a
almost
Western country. In
they
a
think,
Western country, I
right,
would add.
yeah, good point. Good
Yeah.
point.
Because I live in abundance, sort of, compared to the rest
Yeah,
of the world.
sure.
I didn't really contribute to that. My country
Yeah.
pillaged the world a few hundred years ago. That's what I'm benefiting from. So I don't even, so I'm saying it, but I'm not saying it's not going to be a shock for me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
To actually work to receive any economic reward. I don't think I know what actually working is. That doesn't mean I don't have skills, but like if I see a picture from, I don't know, third generation guy in a family just chopping away in some African mine, that's kind of my point.
Right.
Like that
But and don't you think? Do you think that in that future, in that Bitcoin future, that you know where money is the most scarce resource, the little bit of Bitcoin that you earn for whatever you can do will be able to buy you far more than the little bit of dollars
yeah,
or euros that you're earning today.
yeah,
And that's sort of the magic, right? Is that when you have an entire planet competing for the scarcest resource, which is money, that money's purchasing power is growing exponentially. So if you put in a day's worth of work and you spend what you need to spend and you have some left over as savings, that will purchase you more tomorrow, and it'll purchase you more the next day, because the competition for resources is driven directly into your savings.
yeah. Well, and you're going to be very picky as to where you're going to spend it, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
people that you're spending it on, because you're spending it, or like I usually describe it like this: like if you look around, everything you see costs energy to create or maintain, and eventually, if a person creates something, right, that's his expending his or her like energy in a certain amount of time. That's their productivity, and that's how they create eventually a product or a service or whatever. And yeah, if you now see we have a lot of money units, the money is in the supply is inflated, so the value of each unit gets less and less over time. But there's also a lot of trash products and services competing for all this money. And if you just have a capped supply, so a scarce money, then a lot of the trash will disappear because it won't get spent on the trash. So you
Mm-hmm.
are incentivized to create real value, whatever that is. I want to emphasize. So if you want to be a baker or a shoemaker or whatever, it doesn't matter what you do, because every product or service has its level of value in a society, right? But yeah, if you're a good shoemaker or a good baker, yeah, you have to do your best to be the best shoemaker or the best baker or the
Right.
best whatever you want to do. And that's, to go back to that spiritual mention, like that's why I think it is kind of like spiritual thing where we can get, because if we have abundance in basic needs, so shelter and food, clothes, etc., just the basic stuff, and we have space and time to figure out what am I good at, that's like a super enlightening experience, because you're going to try something. You're going to try to be a baker, and maybe you're going to try to be a baker as well, and everyone goes to your store, and then you just have to be, if I try it as well, I just have to be like, okay, well, maybe I'm not good enough at baking, but at least I learned something, right? Like, you feel in a very positive way. It's like, okay, I tried this, but I'm not good enough at it, but I learned stuff along the way. Okay, I can actually try something else because I have all this basic stuff. um, uh, I have all this basic stuff already, you know. And if you compare that to now, that's just not the case, right? Like, people have shitty jobs. They have jobs that they hate, you know. So I'm not hating on them having those jobs, but that's the result of having a broken money. Like, it's just, you know, or just, you see that in America, you see that in Europe, the creation of all these government jobs, you know, like, it's all fake, and it's not making people happy, you know. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a job you hate, like, what does that do to your spirit, you know? Like, and I
Mm-hmm.
think so eventually we will get there on a hard money standard, but it's not an easy road. It's a pretty picture to eventually get there, but I don't think it's an easy road. But then, yeah, also why I think
Well,
it's spiritual, like, just the battle for becoming better, a better you, a better life experience, etc. Like, that's just I think that's a great thing.
those a lot of the things that you were mentioning there kind of remind me of millennial values, I guess, or millennial ideals. Do was this sort of the core reason why you wanted to name your podcast Bitcoin for Millennials, or was that completely different
I
from
think
the outset?
personally, yes. For me, when you say millennial value, it's like I want to contribute to something bigger,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily because of a certain amount of money or something like that. I think that's millennial value in a sense, but more in general, I think that, yeah, the future of millennials is, let's say, financially way more uncertain than the the, the boomer future was at that
Mm-hmm.
age, or the Gen X future was at that age. Because, I mean, my mother's almost retiring. She's 65. And I told her, I don't know if the money is there. I don't know if the money that you see in your retirement account, I really don't know if it's there. Wouldn't surprise me if partially it's not, but I
Mm-hmm.
definitely know that I don't have a pension, you know. So I need to I need to fix that in a way. And why am I saying I don't have a pension? You know, if you see the road of debasement of the euro currency, any currency in the world. I mean, you know, you see America in the news a lot because that's the best of all the currencies, but they're all just as bad. You know, it's all a fiat money system. Um, I don't know who I talked to, but we talked about, if you have 3%. No, I have to say it correctly. If you have 7% annual inflation, which is probably closer to the truth. It's conservative, but, you know,
Mm-hmm.
7% inflation. You know, I'm late 30s. I work for another 30 years. You know, then probably half, or 66% or something is gone in
Oh yeah.
purchasing power of that same amount of money. Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah.
if you want to have, let's say you think about your retirement, okay, and you think like, okay, each year I would love to go on a holiday, a $10,000 or euro holiday. Let's say, you know, I want to do luxurious because I'm retired. I want to go on a 10K holiday. Um, how do you save for a 10K holiday every year in your retirement when you start now? You have to take that calculation in mind, right? So if that those amount of units have lost 66% of their purchasing power, you need $30,000 units starting from today to have of those types of holidays when you retire in 30 years? I think one, nobody thinks about that. Nobody thinks about what how much do I need in 30 years, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's one. Two, okay, so I don't need 10, I need 30, and that's for 1 year. And well, I hope I live until, I don't know, 85 or something. So I need 20 times 30. Oh, that's 600K instead of 200K. Okay. And so, when you follow that, and then, for example, you think about, let's say you only do the 10,000 units of a euro or a dollar, right? And you have that in 30 years. Then you can go on a vacation that's equal to, like, what is it? 3,000 euro vacation
Mm-hmm.
today. But just this calculation, or just this little exercise, I don't think anyone does. And no one realized that you need like 3 times more of the euro or dollar units when you retire than what you actually put on the paper, what you actually calculate with. So most people do not take the debasement of the money into account when they think
Right.
about how much money they need in 30 years. So I think that's one. Why I think it's just not going to be there is because, well, you see it in America, and again, America is the best of all the worst. This whole debt spiral and the debasement of the currency is accelerating. It's just like a path dependency in that sense. That train, as Lynn Alden says famously, is not stopping. And for example, on my podcast, I talked to Tony Yazbek, who's from Lebanon, and he told me, he was really rich there, and from one day to the other, there was 100% inflation and everything was gone. And there's people in Lebanon that rob banks not to get other people's money, but just to get their own money, because it's just
Mm-hmm.
like they're not getting it. And when you hear about that, you just have to realize that's the same money system. It's the exact same money system. So what happened there can also happen here. So there's no real planning for the future with the current fiat money that is there. And so I want to focus on millennials because they are like, in like the second part of their career, they're really doing, after their 20s, and they're in their early 30s, like they're moving towards what they're really going to do, or they're building a family, or they want to move to a bigger house or get married, or whatever. Like the big life things happen in this phase of your life, but yeah, once you realize that you cannot plan for that future, so that's just really hard. How do you make big decisions if you cannot plan for the future? And once you realize that future is getting more and more uncertain, um, because that debasement is accelerating, yeah, then
Mm-hmm.
you really have to think about a solution now to secure that future. And for me, that's Bitcoin. Bitcoin for me is the ultimate savings technology, and helps me to reduce the uncertainty that everyone has towards their future. But I think that we especially have way more, because yeah, there's not going to be any pension. So I think
Right.
that's the main reason why I started it. Yeah.
Well, I got the sense that I've just kind of had the sense that Bitcoin is the ultimate currency for a millennial, from the little bit I know about that generation. So before our podcast, I just asked AI, give me, what are the
Oh,
primary
nice.
characteristics, right, of a
Yeah.
millennial? And it says technology. Millennials are confident with technology, are open to new innovations. That's Bitcoin.
Yes.
Work-life balance. Millennials prioritize balancing work with personal life and often seek flexible work environments. Bitcoin can grow
That's my
your
entire
net
life.
worth at 50%
Yeah.
CAGR while you're working your 9 to 5. Collaboration. Millennials value collaboration and recognize the strength of diverse perspectives. They foster inclusive environments and team members feel valued. Join the Bitcoin network.
Yes.
Diversity. Millennials support diversity and inclusion at all levels of life. Bitcoin
Yes.
doesn't care what color you are, how old you are, where you're from, what your language you speak, what sex you are. Multitasking. Millennials are often excellent at multitasking because they have to learn many skills for their jobs, which change quickly. Bitcoin is the most rapidly changing technology I've ever experienced. This is built for you guys.
I know. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It.
Millennials value recognition for their contributions, want to see their work making a difference.
Yeah.
You want to make a difference in the world, stack sats. You're going to have enough wealth that you'll be able to very much change the community around you.
Yes, I say this a lot. Like once you realize that like all the things that you would want to fix in the world, and I think there's a lot of things that millennials have like an opinion about that they want to fix and like make a better future. Like once you realize that all those things are broken because the money is broken, there's like only one option, and the option is move to another money. That's
Mm-hmm.
also how I view Bitcoin. You know, I just said savings technology. It's not an investment. It's literally okay. This literally was literally my realization. Okay, I gathered a certain amount of economic energy in this fiat money system that is designed to work against me and my future and my family and all these things, and I just take it and I move to a provably better system that, as you said, you know, like it's all these things. It's trustless, apolitical, a-religious. It doesn't matter about who you are or where you're from, and I think in that sense it is the perfect money, because the money is neutral, and that will enable like a real free market, right? That will enable that if we meet each other and you are a service provider and I'm a customer, and you give me your value proposition and I think, oh well, that solves my problem or a need that I have, that once we shake hands, it's a relationship between you and me without any third party influencing that relationship. You know, in the case with fiat money, where the reward that we are using for this exchange from me to you is influenced by a third party that doesn't really care about this free environment where we shook hands on whatever the exchanges that we do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You'll love this one. Millennials are cautious about their personal data.
Yeah,
Enters Bitcoin.
nice.
Optimistic. Millennials are quietly optimistic about the environment.
Hmm. Yeah.
Bitcoin is a very green technology, despite what people have been told. I literally think this money was built for millennials. Millennials are avid savers.
Funny. I never looked at a list like this, but I love it. Yeah.
Millennials are nostalgic.
Mm. Well, that's what I just said about the 80s and
Mhm.
90s. Like in general, what I find interesting is that if you really had your youth in the 90s, I think a lot of people reminisce about that youth. I say a lot that, you know, like growing up in that time was probably like the best time to grow up of any person who ever lived, you know. Again, especially in you know, my perspective is from a Western country, of course, but
Yeah, I
that
never
that
really
is
thought of
really
that.
different. That is really different
As
right
a
now.
millennial, you saw the world change from like peak as a kid to where we are today. I mean, you guys hit like the top of the
The
bell
whole
curve.
arc. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Dude,
yeah.
I had VHS tapes, I had cassette tapes, I had CDs, mini disc. I tried out all the stuff. Yeah, first time that there was like SMS text messaging. I
Right, you were
remember
born right into rapid disruption,
all the stuff,
rapid
all the
change.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's rad. Um, and millennials are competitive. That's the last one.
Mm.
Stack more than your
Well, yeah,
bros at the
like
bar.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think I don't know who I had on, but he said the Bitcoin is like the S&P 500 for millennials. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
think the Gen Xers had the S&P, the Boomers had had real estate, and I feel that
Right.
Bitcoin is just the thing to build wealth and secure the future for millennials.
Absolutely. So if you're a millennial and you haven't figured out Bitcoin yet, you've just been called out because this is literally built for you. Um, so obviously that's sort of like been, I mean, you recognized it in yourself first, right? And then you wanted to deliver that message to millennials and the world at large. Um, and from what I read, it sounds like the data is pointing that the millennials are the largest holders of Bitcoin from
Mm,
between all the generations.
Probably it wouldn't surprise me in general, just the younger generations. You know what the idea that I like is that, you know, young Gen Z and just like, you know, young teenage kids now, they grow up in a world where Bitcoin just exists. And when I think about that, then I know that Bitcoin already won over a bit longer time frame, but let's say 2030, when they are like 18, 20, 25, or when Gen Z is like 30. Yeah, what are your arguments for fiat money versus Bitcoin? Like, you cannot ignore the fact that something like Bitcoin exists, and I think these younger generations will prefer this money. So if you think about it like that, then Bitcoin has already won, or at least fiat money has already lost, because there's just no good argument to adopt fiat money. As I said before, like when you hear Christine Lagarde say like, yeah, we use this money because we all agree to trust it, this and that. Like, now that we're talking, I'm thinking like, that's a boomer argument. You know what I mean? It's like a boomer would accept that argument. Like, oh, someone, sorry for all boomers listening, but more like, oh, someone from the government says this, so I'm gonna do it. Okay, I'm really over characterizing, but like, young people that are like, who are you? Who are you? What is, why, you say this thing, but I go on the internet and like 100,000 or millions of people talk about this Bitcoin thing, and you say nothing about it. You just say like, oh yeah, this is a nothing burger, but you talk about it all the time as a central banker. You know what I mean? Like, younger people they don't yeah, they don't run with that. And so yeah, what I like, sorry, I'll add that.
Okay.
For me, this has helped me a lot, just trying to rationalize certain things that are happening, not even about this topic, but just the way of communication, or thinking about, yeah, some stuff has happened in the past, and so that's an example of how, well, Bitcoin in this case is just going to proliferate, and that has helped me a lot to kind of like step out of my own bias or opinion towards this. Just look at like, okay, what is the behavior of people, and how has, for example, the adoption of certain technologies gone? And then, yeah, I don't know, like, for me it's pretty clear.
So I assume you're fairly familiar with like the fourth turning too, right?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. And the greatest generation, after greatest generation came after, was it World War I or World War II?
I think that's early. No. That's the greatest generation is like early 1900s.
Yeah, so World War I.
Yeah, around that. Yeah.
And if I'm getting this correct, I believe the millennials are the echo to the greatest generation.
I think that's the grandchildren.
Well, what I mean is that it would be in sync that millennials would be the next greatest generation.
Oh, like that. Yes.
Like to rebuild,
that's true.
Right? So you have this, the greatest
biggest,
generation.
Just in numbers.
Well, no, I'm talking about in terms of the greatest generation is kind of defined by rebuilding the world after World War I, and the sacrifices they made to build a great future for their children, which then led to all this prosperity, right? Like the hard times that made the hard men, that built this great country that we all benefited from.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we get through this cycle, and then Gen X is like the generation that's just going to break everything, which is what we do. And then the millennials will be there to pick up the pieces and start to rebuild the future.
Yeah.
And I think that's how Neil Howe describes it. And it's because millennials, I think, when I've heard him talk about this, are really focused on, benefiting everybody, giving humanity the tools, not in like, I don't want to make this sound like in a communist way, right? Where everybody gets an equal share. It's just like building a platform and that's fair and equal, and like a meritocracy where people have an opportunity to pursue their dreams and their passions, and do it in a way where the government's structured to support those efforts as opposed to extract from those efforts.
Yeah.
Which was, why America thrived early on and after World War I. And I wonder if it just was thinking, I'm wondering if you've ever thought about that, or have ever framed your generation as a feeling of this is
I
this is
think
our
in a
future. This is our
yeah,
future.
yeah,
Like we're
yeah.
here to take humanity to this next phase of evolution.
Well, I do see that, right? So the people that did that in the 1950s in America, right? They were between like 30 and 50 of those of that great generation. And I've often thought about, what happens when we are in charge, right? When we are in the ruling I don't want to say, yeah, when people of our age are in the ruling class, or
Mm-hmm.
well, when people of our generation are in the ruling class, right? So let's say in 20 years, if I'm mid 50s and I would be somewhere ruling, or other millennials would be, yeah, there's just other principles than the people that are ruling now. That's kind of the maybe the jokingly what I just said, but yeah, just because someone says something doesn't mean it's true. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a core kind of like uh attitude of a millennial, like, okay, show it to me, prove it to me, where's the information, like I think Bitcoin goes even further when you think about like just talk, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
words versus walk. I
Proof
think a
of work.
millennial is kind of in between. But like boomers are, that's what I mean. Like they listen to talk. They think like, oh, this person with a certain position talks and then I listen.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a millennial will be like, okay, well, but tell me about it. Like how, what do you mean? Can you substantiate this, etc.? And so I feel that, and that's what I thought about a lot. That's what I want to say. Like when we are in charge, it will be a different world,
Mm-hmm.
just because the entire um, attitude is different. And I think that's what you're alluding to. So
Yeah, I
I
think
haven't.
Vivek was
Yeah,
like for us. I think in the United States, Vivek was like the first glimpse of that,
I think so. Yes, it's just when you
and
see him talk,
it
like
was awesome.
who talks like that. Whether
Mm.
he says things you agree with or not, it doesn't really matter. But it's more about the way of communicating, the, let's call it, attempt at more transparency and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. It's just different. It's just a
Yes,
different
yeah, it's
different
for sure.
style. Yeah,
Very
and
different.
it's not a surprise. I like it.
Yeah.
Whether I agree or not, again, but it's just a better way. I listened to a Robert Breedlove podcast where they talked about, in the times of the Greeks, etc. Like people would have ferocious like idea battles. Like
Mm-hmm.
they would have huge discussions around ideas, right? And when you had an idea, it's not like having an idea right now. Like if you have an idea right now but you cannot um, philosophically substantiate it, then yeah, your idea just sucks. Like if you cannot explain why it's an idea or why something should happen, then it's just a sucky idea, and that's okay. But don't try to make it like, oh, it's a good idea because I have a certain role at a certain company or in a certain government, and because I say it now, it's a good idea. Like in that time, you had to defend your ideas, or nothing. It just wouldn't happen. And I think when we talk about Vivek, for example, it's we get back to something like that, because even if my idea is conceptually better, if I cannot communicate it, then my only way is to force it. And that shows that it's a bad idea. You
Right.
know what I mean? So, um, yeah, you need to develop these communication skills in order to convey your ideas. And I think, yeah, again, Vivek is an example. And I hope people from many sides of the aisle, or any political color or whatever, just develop those skills, because then it's, I don't want to say easier, but more clear to general citizens, like how to judge what the ideas are, not
Mm-hmm.
just, you know, Paul's idea sucks because he's a Nazi. That's the
Mm-hmm.
level of
Yeah.
argument that we're
Right.
at
Right.
right
Right.
now. And, like, that's, for me, that's very hollow. It's very empty.
Yes. Yeah. It is.
I don't think
Yeah.
you're a Nazi. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm all right. I'm pretty confident that I'm not. um, so look at you get to talk to a ton of people. You've done your show for a number of years now. I'm curious, what is out of all the people you've talked to, what is sparking the most amount of interest or passion for you right now? Because I know from being, I think we've kind of been in Bitcoin roughly about the same amount of time. in every cycle you see a lot of the same stuff, but every once in a while something comes around that's just like, boom, that's brand new. And I never really thought about Bitcoin in that way before. Is there anything like that that's like just hit you in this cycle, or because you talked to somebody that you think is super exciting?
I love this question. I mean, I think it's that's maybe it's a corny answer, but what we talked about with the abundance, it's really what Jeff Booth talks about. It's if we can really just what it has taught me, I think this cycle, and especially doing the podcast, is just thinking like way bigger picture, or at least trying to attempt that, because it's hard because you have to do a few things at the same time. Like you have to conceptualize in the future with information you don't have, and then you have to like put that against alternatives and then kind of like reason through it. So I think it's a hard thing to do. But if you really think about, again, yeah, I go back to the spiritual part, but it's like if we currently many people are lost in the physical world, right? They're lost with status and stuff and just money in general. I need money and showing off and like all these things. I don't want to say sins, but all the temptations of like the physical world. Everyone is stuck in that basically. But yeah, I believe we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. So and that the goal of life is to, or the goal of life that's been given to you, the time that's been given to you, is to like figure out how you can integrate duality, or maybe non-duality, that you are like you have a physical experience, but you also have a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being. That we see what happens when we are all stuck in this physical plane and doing all these physical things and tie our identity to elements from the physical world, let's call it like that. And so I really feel that if we get to this place of abundance in the physical world, the fact that you can have a time and space to explore the spiritual side, that we can really get to this phase of enlightenment, or maybe renaissance, however you want to call it, like this real exploration of what is going on here? Why are we here? What am I here to do? Like I said, like what can I bring to other people? How can I help other people? And I feel that is a big part, at least from my like view on life, of the experience of life in general. And I think we are really far away from that. And I like the idea of having the possibility to get there. I don't know if that will be in our lifetime, but I think that's an idea that makes me very, very enthusiastic about trying to contribute to this, to follow this, to tell other people about this. And it just makes me really positive about the future, which I mean, sometimes I am on Reddit, in like the Millennials subreddit, and I see how nihilistic and negative people are, and I read these stories or how they feel. And I honestly, every time I read something like that, I just think like, I never feel like that. I don't have that. I don't have that anxiety or all these things that people
Did you
about.
never have it ever?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Bitcoin is a part of solving that, but
Yes,
I think the journey into yourself, or self development, however you want to call it, I think is another big part of it. Psychedelics for me is a big part of it, but that's I love this question. Thank you for asking me. Thank you for letting me reflect on that. That's a great question. I feel like that. Like it makes me enthusiastic about the future, and how I conceptualize it. Then I'll stop talking. Is this? That's what Safe Dina Moose talks about, right? Like you don't know how much time you have in this life, right? So you know all the conceptual things about you have to be, it's precious, and you have to live it and be conscious, and all these things. And like that is of course all true. But it's hard to live that when you feel this, yeah, it's kind of like perpetual anxiety in a sense about the future because it's so unsure. You know what I mean? Like it's limited in time, but you don't know how much time you have. So that gives you uncertainty towards the future. But yeah, again, if you have a tool as in that is Bitcoin that helps you save the reward for the time and energy that you expend in the now that you get a reward for, that lowers the uncertainty towards that future, which lowers your anxiety towards the future, which gives you more attention to the now, I think, which will help you live more in the now, like really live it, you know. Um, and yeah, I think that's just very fucking positive. I cannot
Yeah.
say anything else about it. I think that's just really, really, really positive. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think about I think about this kind of stuff a lot as well. I feel like for whatever reason, Bitcoin is here right now. We're also moving into a chaotic time where a lot of disclosure is going to happen. Crime disclosure, corruption disclosure, fraud disclosure. That and looking at the abyss of evil, or like you said, the nihilism, like getting to the point where you're staring straight at the most horrible thing, or you're feeling horrible about your future. That is the point at which the trigger can be pulled and you can finally find truth, happiness, freedom. You can sort of just like accept and change that direction. I think it's really hard to do unless it's existential, unless you feel like it's the end.
Yeah, then you're
Like,
forced. Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
And we spend, I mean, I constantly fall back into this freaking rat race myself, right? Where you like, you can have those days where you're just like, you're so grateful for everything that you just get to be in this body and experience this being here and all the craziness that is around you every day, and meeting a wonderful person like you through the internet. Like this is crazy, the kind of shit we get to do, right? Amazing experiences. You can be grateful for that, and then at the same time, 15 minutes later, you can be like, I got to run to this, I got to run to that, I got to do this, I got to get gas, I got to get my daughter that, I got to get my son that, and then you're just completely out of it again. And this is sort of the duality that we have to live in. But I think this is what's so interesting, and I think this is where you're going. Like with Bitcoin, if you could attain a level of abundance where the I have to becomes
Yes.
I want to, and this is where I am passionate about doing this as opposed to I have to do this.
Yep.
That shift is changes so much in regards to the way humans will interact with each other on this planet. So it's all about like, how do we, and I think this is one of the beautiful things that you're doing, right? You're trying to deliver that to humanity through your podcast. You're trying to get as many people on that ship as possible so that they can have that in their life. So thank you for doing that, number one. And then, I mean, you're doing great work, and I just hope we can get as many people into the system as possible, as fast as possible, because we want to see humanity get there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I really just think like I'm doing my part, trying to do my part just as you are. But yeah, I it's just really about that, and I want to emphasize like abundance does not mean Lambo, right?
Right.
It's I think abundance is a very personal. You can fill that in with your own personal preferences, but I think the eventual joke is that it's probably not a Lambo. You know, that's the whole
Right.
idea. I
It's
think it's
well-being.
eventually
Yeah.
way simpler than that. And as you said, I heard someone say, if you win the rat race, you're still a rat. And then I realized that, and I tweeted this, that did okay. I said, when you adopt Bitcoin, you stop running the rat race and start walking your own path. Like you go from running to walking, and you decide on your own path. I think that's what you just said. Like it's more about the conscious, a more conscious experience of the life that you've been given. And I mean, I just said that, and I think what I feel feels amazing. I think that is what it's about, right? And that is the thing that I hope more people can experience, because I know I'm experiencing that through Bitcoin. So yeah,
I heard a great quote the other day. It says, "If you're not changing it, you're choosing it."
I like that.
Yeah, I was like, holy smokes. There's
but
a lot of shit. There's a lot of shit I'm choosing I need to change.
Of course, but I think what you just said. Oh, I have to do this or that or blah blah. Like, it's fine that you have to do these things, because at one point you made a decision that now makes you do these things. But again, I think it's more about the being conscious about it. Okay, do I want to do this? Well, or can I just stop? Or like,
but what it just made me think about this, Bram, is that you start with, if you can shift, I have to do these things, to I have to do these things because that gives me the money to buy Bitcoin, which is going to lead to me not having to do these things.
That's conscious.
That's the conscious shift. That's the choosing the change. And I mean, that's, I think, where many Bitcoiners came from, right? That's the kind of like the pleb mantra, right? I've sold all my furniture. I work at my 9 to 5 because I'm buying Bitcoin. Yeah. But it's getting you where you want to go. You made that conscious decision to, I'm going to run the rat race so that I can walk the path I want to walk at some point in the future. Yeah. And you can be, there's like, you can be proud of yourself for doing that. And it will give you the tolerance to suffer that, especially when you're watching your savings grow and you're getting to your destination. And I just encourage as many people as possible to experience that,
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. Bram, as always, buddy, love talking to you. Hopefully you're going to get to Florida sometime. I get to meet you in person.
I should. Yeah. Let's see. I'm next year. In February. I'm expecting a baby girl. So
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So I don't know if there will be
number
much
one.
Traveling. No, number 2.
Number 2. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know how much traveling there will be, but yes, Florida is on my list. So don't worry.
Awesome.
Manuel. Thank you.
Thank you, and come back again. We'll continue the conversation.
Definitely. Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money, and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest Byte Federal ATM and turn your cash to coin. Byte Federal has over 1,200 locations around the country with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, bytefederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only US manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our US-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.